Hey, welcome to your weekly Corner Späti. It's me, Kieran, and I'm joined by Nick.
Yo.
And Rob.
Hey.
We have a special guest today. Why don't you introduce yourselves, Cole?
My name's Cole Stangler. I'm a journalist based in Paris, French-American, and covering French politics for a number of different outlets, and also working covering business on television.
Nice. Yes, because this is our first. This is not the first episode we've talked about France. God knows it's impossible not to talk about France and talk about Europe. But this is like our official launch into French election season, or the year of pain. I'm going to call it, because I'm not going to like any of this. I don't think
we've avoided France a lot.
We avoid France,
and it's gone on too long.
I found out recently someone who listens to the show is just like, whenever I want to know what's going to happen on the next episode, I just look at Kieran's Twitter account, and a lot of my tweets this week have just been like, I'm so depressed. I don't want to look at France, or just like resharing the video of like the anti-racist demonstrators at the Zemmour rally getting attacked and things like that. So it's fun stuff.
But Kieran, you can't keep Kieran away from an election.
No, you can't.
An election season.
The numbers that go up, it's great.
News junkies around the world are rejoicing. Who is going to be the next Jupiterian god emperor? That's my understanding of how French elections work. They all
you inherit that title.
Yeah, who's the reincarnation of Pepin the Short or whatever.
Yeah. So we're going to give you a little bit, you listeners at home, a bit of an overview, and Cole's going to help us out as someone who actually speaks French and is there. So that will be helpful. So Rob, why don't you?
Sure. Well, I feel like we got to start with the Jupiter himself, Macron. Just as like an overview, he won in 2017. And there was a lot of talk of how he's going to completely change. I believe one of the labels that you mentioned a lot, Kieran, is a startup nation. So on balance, like what's happened since 2017 that Macron is like, what kind of policies? How would you summarize it? Like what's the landscape now compared to 2017? Just to start on the political front, just to start.
Yeah, I mean, as you alluded to, Macron had this sort of reformist agenda that he wanted to implement upon taking office in 2017. And he was able to pass through a number of pretty pro-business neoliberal reforms as he had promised during his 2017 campaign. And so some of the major ones at the beginning of his presidency are the repeal and replacement of the wealth tax, which covered people with assets of 1.3 million euros and above. So in France, we're talking about very wealthy people that got this tax cut, 1.3 million euros in assets and above. So scrapping that wealth tax in his very first budget. Again, in the early days of Macron's term, things have changed. He also passed through this overhaul of labor law in France, essentially making labor law more pro-employer, putting caps on the amount of amount of damages that workers could win when they win cases in labor courts for wrongful terminations and other violations of labor law, undermining the overall structure of labor law in France, which had been in place for decades, in which you had the company level, the sector level, and then the national level of negotiations. And so the kind of push for a while from the right that Macron was able to get through was more undermining these kind of sectoral and national labor agreements, to giving more authority, broadly speaking, to the local level, which is something that employers have pushed actually throughout Europe, as I'm sure you guys are aware. So the repeal of the wealth tax, the labor law reforms, there was a reform of the rail system, the SNCF, which, as you may recall, triggered large strikes. And that was sort of a big victory for Macron at that time, because the big question at that point was, is he going to be able to carry out this quote unquote, bold, whatever, courageous reform agenda when he's, has to deal with the big union protests. And, he was able to successfully get through that the reform of the SNCF, the train system, which also included a repeal of the special status that railroad workers used to have in France, giving them access to earlier retirement. We've also had unemployment insurance reforms, again, very much in this neoliberal direction of making it essentially enhancing state oversight over people that are receiving benefits, making them check in more with the state, similar to, from what I understand, to what you guys have in Germany, although maybe not all the way in that direction.
A lot of what you're saying is like, I'm just sitting here being like, God, you guys had a wealth tax in 2017? That's crazy. I thought they got rid of those ages ago.
Yeah. So, there's this whole reform agenda. And I think things really kind of came to a halt because of two important episodes that have sort of colored the Macron presidency since then, which is, of course, the Yellow Vest movement that seemingly came out of nowhere, at least from their perspective, the government's perspective, which interrupted this reform agenda and forced them to actually spend a lot more money on handing out concessions to try to prevent people from, burning down the Élysée Palace and continuing to protest. And then the other big reform agenda that was really blocked because of COVID was, the mother of all reforms in France, which is the retirement system, the pension system. And the government was in the middle of winning this battle in the sense that the union protest movement wasn't able to really to stop the reforms from going through. But really in the early days of COVID, so I don't want to get my dates wrong here, but let's say I think March, April, the government said in the beginnings of the COVID crisis that they were going to table this reform and take it up at a later date. There was questions about whether or not they were going to do that before the 2022 election. God knows why you would want to do that now. But anyways, that was something they were thinking about. Now it's sort of postponed until after the presidency. So that was a lot of information. But basically the trajectory is very, big economic reform agenda that, is sort of interrupted by the Yellow Vest, interrupted by COVID. And then in the meantime, and maybe we'll get into it as well, there's been, a lot of emphasis on national security, and the supposed fight against quote unquote separatism, Islamist separatism, which has also taken up political space as well. That's sort of the broad brush of the Macron presidency so far.
And I want to correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like a lot of the reforms he pushed, especially early days before the pandemic, before Yellow Vests, is a lot of the stuff that basically destroyed the Hollande government. The reforms that the Socialist Party couldn't get through, and where he's from as well. Yeah.
I mean, there was the labor reforms. Macron sort of made a name for himself as Hollande's finance minister, basically trying to reform French labor law. And we saw one big round of labor law reforms under Hollande, and Macron sort of delivered the second, the second pillar of that same reform agenda. Again, the main idea being trying to really undermine this system of, not to geek out too much about labor law, but the system of the pyramidal, way that labor law was set up before, where you have, I guess it's a reverse pyramid, right? So you have the local level, the company level, the sector level, the national level, and this very sort of, defined way of conducting bargaining. That's, frankly, a pain in the ass for American companies that, are used to not having to deal with unions. I don't know. You think about a company like FedEx. They don't like having to come to France and having to negotiate with all these unions, while they're in the US, spending money on union busters and making sure that their workers, don't have a voice at the workplace. So this is something that's been building for a long time. And anyways, to get back to your initial point, yeah, we saw sort of some, hints of this under Hollande. Macron has sort of taken it further, and he's taken further, stuff that other presidents have hinted at as well. Sarkozy has talked about retirement reforms. Juppé under Chirac attempted some type of retirement reform. This is sort of trying to realize, a big business agenda, an employer agenda that has been in the works for years, really.
Really makes you feel like all the parties are different.
I just want to come back to something you mentioned when you said Macron's, I don't know, like anti-terrorism measures. Is that mostly the global security law that was, I think that was from last year, that I think got a lot of attention. Is there anything else people should know about, like similar, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like what's going on with all that?
Well, there was, fortunately, there haven't been really major terrorist attacks in the last few years under Macron. Of course, there were a few under Hollande. There was, this attack of a school teacher who was killed, and that triggered discussions about French secularism, but also very concretely this question of Islamist terrorism. Of these terrorist attacks that have occurred in France. Some of them, not all of them, some of them have been committed by French people born in France and raised in France, then getting attracted to jihadist movements. And so the idea for the government was to pass a law to help fight what they called separatism, which is a pretty loaded term because some of the critics, and there were not that many of them, were arguing that, I think without, and to their credit, were arguing that it was important not to inflate the threat of jihadism with Islam more broadly. But even if we get into the weeds, like conservative versions of Islam, which are not the same as people that are, wanting to commit terrorist acts. In any case, so this was a significant push from the government as well. And we had this really kind of securitarian, I don't know if that's a word in English, push towards that law against separatism, which I guess they then eventually renamed the law reinforcing Republican principles, I think, or something like that, because they realized separatism was kind of polarizing. That and then the national security law, which specifically wasn't about terrorism, but it was coming after the Yellow Vest protests that were pretty violent. There's the police unions are up in arms about these lefty protests, Antifa. And so, I think this was in many respects, the government responding to this kind of moment, but also, giving some crumbs to the police unions that want to just, bash some heads in or whatever.
Oh, yes.
So I guess that takes us to 2022. So it seems like, I don't know if you would say how much of Macron's agenda he's accomplished, how much he hasn't. What would another Macron term look like? Because he's at the top of the polls, sitting pretty steady at 23%, basically a shoe-in for the final round.
Shoe-in for the final round. Yeah.
So what's okay. You're the expert. Please
Spicy.
Let us know. But yeah, so what would a second Macron term look like? Well, like what's still on the agenda for Macron? And I was just going to say capital, but yeah.
I think they would, certainly Macron would want to move ahead with the retirement reform, the pension reform, finish the work that was interrupted by COVID. I think we'd see similar pro-business reforms, anti-worker reforms. I think we'd also Macron is putting a lot of emphasis on Europe too these days, and it's really he's a difficult person to analyze, frankly, because he says so many things, and he often doesn't live up to what he says. And this is why often when people ask me, ideologically, how do you make sense of Macron? Yeah, he is a neoliberal, but he also understands you can use the state to your advantage in certain moments, and that French people are deeply are attached to the state as a way of redistributing wealth and supporting people, and that you can't really push the envelope too far, that you can push it a lot. But it's why we haven't really in France had, there was never a Thatcher or Reagan. People have compared Macron to that. The French welfare state is sort of dying this really slow, drawn out death where even Macron realizes that he can't go too far, but I'm kind of getting away from what I was trying to say. Yeah, he talks a lot about Europe as well, and partnering with the new German government as well. So I think he wants to, also try to, assert France's role on the international stage as well. And there's this question, and again, it's hard to know how much of this is real, how much of it is just, communications kind of like, and not to be taken seriously. There's idea of like, the sovereign Europe. I don't really know what to make of that. I don't know what you guys make of that.
I love Macron for multiple reasons. One of
unexpected.
Mike.
The first thing is that I think a really good thing that you pointed out there is that Olaf Scholz is kind of, low key made, not Macron is like a model, because I don't think a German would want that, but there's definitely like a level of cooperation that then Scholz is going to do that Merkel didn't. Like Merkel and Macron had a bizarre relationship of like him being obsessed with her as like a Europhile, but Merkel and Macron never actually they didn't see eye to eye, but it was just kind of like it was more of a vibe rather than like a policy making thing at the end of the day. And so Merkel and Macron's last meeting together, they went to like a winery, and I had one of the oddest interactions I've ever seen of a world leader, where Macron like brought, I don't know if this is like real or staged or whatever, but like groupies to then have like them like take pictures with him and Merkel when they're at this like winery as this like send off. It's one of the creepiest things, and it happens pretty frequently with Macron. But like it just seemed like doubling down on it because Merkel was there. And there's but Scholz, the very first person that he met with yesterday, is Macron, Jens Stoltenberg, and Ursula von der Leyen. An absolute nightmare blunt rotation. And it really I think it's kind of telling too, in the sense of like, I mean, given I am the least educated person of the group here when it comes to French politics, at least when it comes to Macron, but in the sense of how it like fits into that, I think with the new coalition and this one Scholz's obsession with Europe, that's more so than the CDU. Like the CDU is not like they're anti-Europe, but Scholz like did a bunch of interviews in English, kind of being in the sense that we're going to rekindle this relationship to Europe that Germany kind of tarnished after the financial crisis and after Brexit, and that he's definitely looking to like Macron as this kind of, Germany and France coming together, best of friends once again, gonna restart Europe. And you have a very neoliberal government, while Merkel's government, the CDU government, was a version of neoliberalism. It's kind of this like bizarre German mercantilism that's like
productive capital rather than rentier capital.
And I think that this is kind of a perfect stage of that then this German government that Macron can work with actually for, maybe the rest of this term, maybe a second term, really can rekindle this bizarre like liberal obsession with just like European identity. That's pretty hollow actually when you start breaking it down. It's just like just vibing. And we've talked about on the show how the current German coalition is like vibe central, and Macron is liberal vibes. Liberals love him, even though like he's relatively like kind of not popular,
I mean, like if you were to lay out his policy positions, they probably wouldn't agree.
Oh no.
They like the atmosphere he gives off.
Vibes.
I mean, I think we've talked about this before in the podcast before, that like for like everything that Macron is, the one that he kind of like champions a little bit, or at least from the international perspective, is the kind of like Europeanism, because I get the impression that Macron has always been surrounded by a bunch of people where all of his other beliefs are just considered normal. Like the neoliberalism, everyone's not really, people around him aren't really questioning that. They're just like, yeah, it's the way you'll do things, blah, blah, blah. But the Europeanism is his thing. It's like the thing he's like comes in with. Because I remember I was watching France 24, and there was a lot of like chat from Macron about like getting Europe together, and then like in the same sentence like wanting support from Europeans in the Sahel region, which is like, oh, okay. So that's how you envision this coming together.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other point, which I was sort of alluding to, and again, it's hard to know how seriously to take him, especially because now France's presidency of the European Union is going to be extremely politicized, taking over in January, coming up to this election. Macron's going to say a lot of stuff, and frankly, it's hard to separate what's him on the campaign trail versus what's really to be taken seriously. But he's talked about, strategic autonomy. Does that mean that, He wants, France to be a little more independent when foreign policy, sort of reviving this Gaullist, sort of ideology. We saw that expressed with the whole submarine debacle with the United States. But again, it's hard to know what's
about that.
When you're in France, you can't forget about that because that was a whole thing.
But critical support for that because it will just end up in either Macron destroying NATO by getting France out of it or assassinated by the CIA. So for attempting to do so. It seems like a win-win for us.
Leftists in 2040 being like the U.S. took out socialist leader
Macron. God damn it.
I think that's actually relevant to I want to get into the other candidates, and I felt just personally researching everything things seem to be different, and so the general question I have for you is what's happened in Macron's France? It seems like things have gotten, as an American, to me, a little more familiar since 2017, going to 2020. And I know you had a piece in the New York Times actually about the culture wars in France, and even the idea of culture wars. So, what has happened, and what is what is this brave new world or this new political climate, or at least political discourse going on?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. If you look at the news cycle here in France, what's pretty striking is that you have a news cycle that's really driven by, in my mind, the right wing, with sort of themes that make me think, of what we talk about in the United States, or at least what the American right talks about, which is to say, this whole just kind of collection of culture war issues that didn't really have much of a place in France before, but are now debated on the talk shows, talked about by members of the cabinet, and occupying a lot of political space. So to be really concrete here, one of the things that, just to give you an example of some of these cultural issues, France has been obsessed, and I mean really obsessed, with this idea of cancel culture, right? Which we're also so utterly sick of hearing. I wish I was kidding, but this is what the media discourse is here. So they're obsessed.
I was like what would French Louis C.K. be called? It would be Louis C.K.
Obsession with cancel culture, with wokeness. There was a really good piece recently in The Nation by James Macaulay, sort of unpacking this war on wokeness in France. And wokeness, it sort of helps, reactionaries and establishment politicians in France feel good about their French identity because they tend to oppose, the universal republic, which doesn't see any difference in people's identities, their race, it's colorblind, it doesn't care if you're gay, straight, or whatever, versus these sort of identitarian people who are obsessed with difference and pointing out difference and tearing people apart and making us watch all their TV shows that are disconnected from reality, and their music, whatever. And I know this sounds silly, but this is it takes.
This is the same shit in Germany. Again, Europe's best friend.
Yeah. It takes up a lot of space, and you have a lot of battles about this. You have battles about writing, what's known as inclusive writing in France, basically. The practice of making language more gender neutral, which isn't so evident in France, with French being a Romance language. So there is this debate about having a new pronoun, and even Brigitte Macron, the first lady, jumped in and said she was against it. There's an obsession about hunting rights. It's and you're sort of what are we talking about here? We're in a
I feel every listener in Germany is just nodding their heads. Yes, all right, sounds familiar. I
thought it'd be easier. They only have two grammatical genders.
Yeah, no. I have a the culture war thing is probably one of the most at home ones. Yeah. The one that at least this is just from me seeing it kind of out a similar thing that happened in Germany, but that didn't have any political clout whatsoever last year during the election, has been COVID. And France is, I think, the exact opposite, where you have candidates who have making that they're like. I mean, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I do think that then while Macron was sitting pretty for, the first 2 years, Yellovis came in, kind of dealt with it, wasn't, isn't popular, obviously, amongst the working class, but COVID, at least from what I've seen, has been that like one issue that then France has not, that Macron's government at least has not been able to shake off, and has kind of like combined with the culture war thing, combined with the idea that then like, whatever Macron's doing is like authoritarianism. France was one of the first countries to do a vaccine mandate for, government, for I think just public service workers, but I could be wrong. And it really, I forget his name, who is one of the presidential candidates who became the poster boy for the COVID marches. But you'd have these weekly COVID marches that would just go all throughout Paris of, tens of thousands of people. And Germany, that didn't become an issue. There was no, the AfD didn't take up COVID very well, where this could be actually a thing that possibly could.
The CDU was punished, but they were punished for the floods in West Germany rather than COVID.
So there's what is, how does, I guess, that fit into the whole scheme of things? Is that at least, because the thing, me being the dumbest person on here about France, that's kind of the one that at least that I've seen whenever covering France and whatnot, that's just the most eye-opening to me, of that it is kind of a stark difference between other countries in Europe, where it is there's a lot more anger, I think, behind COVID in France than there are in other countries.
Every prediction at the beginning, towards the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, was any future election, COVID's going to be this big thing. And then every election came and went, and they're just not really. No, the Netherlands didn't make a huge impression either, and stuff like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think if the election, would have happened just, a few months after the beginning of the COVID crisis, maybe it would have had more of an impact, because there was a period where there, and there still is to some extent, a lot of criticism of the government's handling of the pandemic, just outright, falsehoods about not needing to wear masks, about not having masks, about the situation in the hospitals being underfunded. So there's a lot of criticism about that. And I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but there has been a lot of criticism. But I think, by and large, the government's health pass, which did spark a lot of opposition, and including people on the left, including many people on the left, that policy in itself has proven effective, at least in its immediate goal of stopping circulation of the virus. So I guess now, things are again.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Catastrophic, but.
Yeah, so I just got very abruptly reminded of the fact that in Germany we had the term Woko Haram in the whole anti-woke thing.
That's so cool. That is the best one of those horrible names.
I feel like it should be more popularly adopted.
It really should. It's so stupid.
That's good.
So if you want to get
Haram's
into
good.
the right-wing grift columnist complaining thing, I'm just giving you Woko Haram for free.
Well,
you can just take
in France, there was, as maybe you're aware of, there was this term Islamo-Gauchiste.
Yes,
Islamo-Leftist.
Yeah, that's just
sounds cool.
I remember seeing that for the first time. I think it was when I found out about Bernard Arnault's whole hiring of that ex-French Foreign Legion to spy on Mediapart. L'Esquale, the shark, if I remember correctly. Great story, absolutely hilarious. But he was constantly writing about Islamo-Leftist, and I was just I just feel like the Cold War and post 9/11 just just had a nice little baby.
Yeah. That's what we call a twofer in the biz.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to talk more about the culture wars, but I know we're going to get into it with the next two candidates.
Yeah.
So we might as well get into it. I know we're teasing everyone. We won't be talking about Timothy Chalamet going through the aging face app. We will start with Marine Le Pen, who I guess most listeners will remember from 2017, the right-wing candidate against Macron.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to talk about that we can't here, so I'll just put this question to you, Cole. Part of Marine Le Pen's mission, as I understand it, was softening this party with roots in fascist movements of the 70s. To what extent has that been successful, and how has that changed or not changed from 2017 to 2020? Like what's their, how did they recover from 2017? What's their game plan for 2020?
Yeah, I think they've been somewhat successful in terms of their PR operation of sort of detoxifying the brand of the National Rally, especially now, and we'll mention it, I'm sure later, that you have a candidate even further right than Marine Le Pen, so that helps make you seem more mainstream. No, but I think they've been, it's called de-demonization here, and they've, been very careful about, I should say relatively careful about the way that they speak so that they can, to use an American term, have, a very dog whistling kind of approach to talking about racism, talking about race and foreigners, and the kind of that the old time religion that their supporters understand when they can make oblique references to.
Right.
But that being said, the National Rally hasn't really been able to have much electoral success. They haven't had much electoral success since 2017. You might have thought at that moment that, okay, well, after this great performance, the best performance ever of the National Rally in the presidential election, maybe that was going to translate into, if not legislative success because of the low turnout and the particularities of the French system, then you would say maybe at least in the regional elections or in the local or in the local elections.
I'm sorry, Cole. I'm going to announce it on now. I'm on mic on this podcast. Last time we talked about France being like, they're going to win PACA. They're going to win it. And then now here I am like a fucking chump. They did not win that region.
Yeah, I was down there reporting on that and following them. And that was the feeling was that they were going to win that. But we can so it is interesting to kind of think about why they didn't do well in the regional elections. They did well in the European elections. But as we know, those have limited significance. But yeah, they haven't really been able to expand this base of local officials. The one big town that they won was the city of Perpignan, in sort of vaguely in the southwest, but on the Mediterranean, in a very sort of poor part of France. That's where they tend to perform well in sort of poorer cities, appealing to this mix of some working class voters, but also a lot of retirees and middle class people seeing the inequalities around them, seeing foreigners arrive, etc. So they did win this city of Perpignan, but other than that, it was pretty disappointing on the local level. In the regional elections, they didn't win a single region. They were expected to really actually win at two regions, really. PACA in the south of France, an enormously influential, important region, which really includes everything from Marseille and Nice, all the way up to sort of like small towns in the foothills of the Alps and Avignon as well. They didn't win that. They didn't win the region of the north, Hauts-de-France. They were expected to win there and maybe even compete in a third region. They didn't win anything. And what's interesting, actually, when you think about their sort of attempts to soften their image, what's interesting is that, and again, I'm not trying to make value judgments here because obviously I have no sympathy for the National Rally, but what's interesting is, just to clarify with you guys here, I have no sympathy for the National Rally. What's interesting is that because the party has sort of softened their discourse, it's I think it's fair to say that in some respects they're sort of becoming another mainstream political party like the others, part of this political establishment in France that is just obsessed with getting elected and not doing anything when they're in office. And, I think a lot of voters, may have had that impression. And so you have their base that turns out for these elections. But in the end, if you're a party like everyone else, then, you don't have that sort of like establishment aura that you used to have. And that, I think, also partly explains why we're seeing a candidate that's even more to the right of Marine Le Pen, who's sort of recapturing that, that early far right good old racist xenophobia that the National Front has worked so hard to sort of, hide.
Yeah. I think in the sense too with France, it's probably one of the most interesting aspects of that. Yeah. Like they've become establishment to a degree because France's party just like have been reshuffling for the past like 20 years or so. And you can come in a lot easier than in a situation like that. Be whatever populist right, whatever you'd call them back in 2017, 2016, 2017, and make your mark and at the same time sell out pretty quickly. And I think that then our next candidate who comes up is kind of the one. I don't know, like I guess the bigger question for me at the end of it is that like there will be a lot of people who will ditch Zemmour and just vote Le Pen that could then end up probably tilting the election in her favor at the end of the day. Like, am I right? Like, I feel that that's very much, while like the further right's ridiculous and they are pretty dangerous and pretty violent and extreme, there is like very little chance that he will actually win. And that then like, I don't think that they're just not going to vote, like there is still like Le Pen, I think, while she is, and her party is maybe not doing well on the local stage. Like France is first off much more centralized. The presidency in France matters a lot more than a leadership in other countries. So like maybe this is like it's not even like calculated in any way, but this will end up benefiting her and her party at the end of the day. Like yeah, they may not control anything, but she could very easily end up sitting pretty, giving Macron a run for her money. At the sense of that there's so like the political situation in France is so like just split continuously.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't even know if she's going to be able to make it to the second round either. There's a lot of questions.
She's like neck and neck with Zemmour right now, or has been neck and neck with him.
But is that true? I mean, I thought that Team Macron wants a rematch, and they feel like they can win easily.
No, I think. Yeah, I mean, without getting into too much, just like pure punditry, trail, though, I'm happy. I'm happy to do that also. Yeah, I mean, I think like the polls show at this point that Macron would beat Le Pen pretty handedly, like anywhere from, I think I saw one today that was even like 18% to 10%, which I guess isn't that much, but like 15%, something like that. And I think, it's fair to say Macron would pretty, at this stage right now, if you had an election and there was a second round, Macron would beat Le Pen, Macron would beat Zemmour as well. The biggest threat, I think, for Macron comes from the quote unquote mainstream right, the center right. It's great, the different varieties of right, isn't it? So
we love it.
Just enjoyable talking French politics.
It's pretty common on this podcast ever since I don't know when this started, but just like using this term of like conventional right wing. Once upon a time, this country had two parties, and now that's all gone to shit.
I don't even like saying moderate right. They're not even. They're just a straight out right wing party that's like now going far right even.
Absolutely, but like the story that's old as time is just like, in the 90s and beforehand, there was two mainstream parties that would just swap places, one center left, one center right, supposedly. And I don't know, since 2016, 2008, whatever, all those establishment parties have just like been rejected in one form or another. Yeah. Because like the fucking Socialist Party is polling at 5%. Like their candidate. Like it's ridiculous.
Well, I feel like there's no better time to finally introduce Eric Zemmour, the right-wing candidate who, I don't know. Can you summarize him for our for our
we should
listeners?
explain that reference that you made earlier that like supposedly some French people think that like
our friend Jean, who's been on the podcast a few times, told us we were talking about Timothy Chalamet once, and he's like, in France, no one's like, oh, he's so cute because he looks like this right-wing guy on TV.
What?
And then when I saw Zemmour, I was like, oh, that's him.
He looks like,
He blew up. He's going international. So, all right, I'll start with
Eric Zemmour.
My understanding.
I love
Zemmour.
Dune.
He's a regular panelist on the French version of Fox News and writes a lot of books and is kind of like the heir of this like Paris intellectual who talks about the decline of France, the feminization of France, the Great Replacement, and how he's like, basically he has like a network of grassroots is not the right word, but outside of a traditional party structure, supporters who want to propel him into the presidency, partly as like, you know, the real right-wing option now that Le Pen has sold out or whatever. What am I missing there?
I just want to say I love the laundry list, because some people at home might have been shocked with the whole like great replacement thing, but like I'm pretty sure it was like a French author who came up with that myth, like the whole Eurabia thing.
Yeah, it was.
But I love the feminization of France. I'm looking forward to hearing that theory. I'm looking forward to like a right wing or a Canadian like right wing pundit on YouTube explain that to me one day. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, he has a whole book about that, right? It's called the First Sex, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Okay, all right. Homework for me. But yeah, Eric Samoy.
He does.
That needs to be fact checked. I'm having some doubts right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Yeah. So you know, he was sort of this journalist, polemist, you know, journalist, right wing journalist, fairly mainstream, very well, you know, a lot of good connections across Paris, really across Paris, only in Paris. All the media elites knew him. And you know, what really, and I was having a debate about this, you know, recently, actually. I don't get into Twitter discussions like I used to do. So I try to avoid them, but someone, you know, it was taking issue with the fact that I said that, you know, Zemmour is not really an intellectual. He's sort of like playing an intellectual on television because he's had so much success as a TV pundit. And they were saying, well, you know, but what about his whole career? You know, he was covering politics, writing for Le Figaro. And it's true, you know, he was doing more of what we would say like real journalism at a certain point in his career and writing these insane books. But before then he was, you know, doing journalism. But I think you don't really get Zemmour, you know, without the TV personality that is constructed, you know, over the last decade, starting with this TV show on France 2, one of the main public TV channel, in which Zemmour was on this, you know, on this panel of people where they would have celebrities, politicians, and he would sort of like provoke people and be sort of right wing, but still acceptable. He was known to be right wing, but built an audience that way. Kind of continued moving more and more to the right. He since then has been convicted multiple times of hate speech, inciting hatred against Muslims as well. You know, this sort of like provocateur polemicist who then, as you were referencing, has written books about basically France's decline. And then the final sort of evolution before him becoming a candidate was Zemmour was the star panelist on C News. On a TV show that basically he was being interviewed, but it was essentially the Eric Zemmour show where, you know, you have softball questions just sort of, you know, thrown to you, and it was just let him rip, you know, go off on, I don't know, the great replacement without saying it explicitly. You know, is Muslims that don't respect French laïcité. The fact that Green Party mayors want to ban foie gras. The fact that people don't respect the French language, whatever. But this was just him sort of.
These are all cool things. Like I don't see. All right.
Destroy France.
Destroy France. Yes.
That is amazing to me. Maybe my co-host can think of an example, but especially because I've seen people try to compare him to American like Tucker Carlson or something. But the format is so different because the famous, well-known Americans, whether it's like Glenn Beck or Tucker Carlson, they're the ones sitting there and talking into the camera. Let me finish.
What's his name from Bild?
Yeah, well, it's a German thing because instead it's like the star panelists. So like there's something about that where instead of like focusing on this one person all the time, it's honestly like fit for Twitter and stuff because there's always people to dunk on. Like they have to exist in this ecosystem of these like softballs like lobbed up to him where you can just like throw it to your guy. It's honestly like Skip Bayless or Stephen A. Smith or somebody. That's the only American comparison.
It's really interesting when you think, actually. I'm sure someone could probably write something fascinating about this, but just the format of having Zemmour not sort of sitting behind a desk looking into a camera and preaching, you know, but actually like pretend engaged in conversation. We're just having a interesting conversation here, and letting him just go off. And that was sort of what propelled Zemmour into this even more well-known figure. And so for me, he's inseparable from this sort of TV pundit character that he's been playing. And then, he decided he could run for president. Here we are.
No, it's a media thing that I think has been fucking taken advantage for a lot. I know a lot of people talk about with podcasts usually. What's the term they always use with podcasts? The like parasocial relationship thing. But like that exists on TV and has done for a long time. I always think of like I remember watching a bunch of Japanese reality TV shows, and they always cut to these like panels of B-list celebrities who would then comment on the stuff that you just watched of the like main meat and potatoes of the reality TV show. And like someone explained to me that exists for people who are watching the TV show alone to make it feel like they're watching it with friends. And this sounds like a similar thing of like, it's not going to work if it's just more talking to a camera. You have to have someone who's like the pseudo viewer having the conversation with him.
Right.
So who is he from Bills?
There is I forget what his name is, but the best example that I can think of, again, because there is a good portion of our listenership who is in Germany.
Well, like it's not surprising, just while you look for that, it's not surprising that it's a European format, because even in Germany, like super popular are the like roundtable discussion shows.
Like Anna
and so like
that,
you get maybe someone from each party or whatever the case may be.
BBC Question Time as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then this is like a logical extension of like, what if it was rigged so just your favorite was just always winning and beating down on all the others?
Yeah. But there's
it's a breaking of the format a little bit though, because a lot of those panel shows exist to drive the conversation to the right. Like you have some, like all the worst right-wing psychopaths are in like media or journalism. They're not usually in politics, but they exist to drive the politicians to the right, to normalize this language. And like Zemmour has broken through the matrix and was like, no, you're not meant to run. You're meant to just stay and guide the conversation.
Yeah. So there's Paul Ronsheimer is his name, and he's the one for people see his picture just appear on Twitter like internationally like all the time because he's so ridiculous, where he interviewed Olaf Scholz wearing a like an Indian chieftain thing on his head, and he ate a steak in front of Annalena Baerbock, the leader of the Green Party,
with a toy SUV as well.
So like that would be like the best comparison of that person exists in someone who will never run for politics in Germany, which I'm pretty happy for. But yeah, I don't know. We don't know. Because and like the thing of it is that he really like I mean I don't know what like Zemmour. The thing I think that's kind of the interesting thing about it is that then he's perceived as like an intellectual to some regard, maybe not the brightest people, but there is like a level of like ridiculous like bullshit thing that I think that where this Paul Ronsheimer guy can kind of exist of like, this is what you think, like you like, like as the the culture war thing, this and that, and that's probably like the only difference I would say of it. But yeah, these characters are I think in Europe probably far more common than they are in the US. The like explosion of the right is like in this traditional sense is a newer phenomenon to Americans.
Yeah.
That's just, I mean, we don't have to go comparing.
No, I want to get into some of the Zemmour stuff specifically. Actually, Cole, I was thinking of a line, I'm going to paraphrase it from your article about the culture wars, where you say they're distinctly French in content, but American in form. And that's how I think about Zemmour a lot. Just if I could start with the form side of things, like reading about C News, and specifically, I forget the billionaire's name who runs it, but like it seems like a lot. A lot of Zemmour is like he's like exploded since 2017 in terms of like just like what's going on with all that like structural side of things. Like how is he getting in front of everyone's eyes like way more than in 2017?
Yeah, no, I mean this is sort of what we're it's such a complicated issue that you could spend a lot of time talking about, but there is this sort of just shift in the media political discourse, and they're very intertwined. The question we're asking is, why is the far right so popular? That's really the question that we're trying to get at. How is Zemmour having so much success? Why is the far right absolutely dominating the discourse? I mean, the first thing, sometimes I think people on the left have trouble admitting this because they're always looking for explanations. I think, it needs to be said that if you look at the 2017 election results, Marine Le Pen had a very high score. There's a real base of support for the far right, including among working class people in France. People will say, but a lot of working class people don't vote. That's true also. But what matters in politics is when you vote, ultimately, and there is a real base of support that exists. I don't want to deny that. So I think it's just important to say you have a real base that this is not just something that came out of nowhere since 2017. It's been building for years. The far right's been normalized, gaining in popularity. And so that was something we had before then. I think the second factor and sort of what you're getting at, and they're intertwined, but this shift in the media discourse that's sort of tapping into that far right base, playing off of it, for clicks, for clips that get shared on online, for viewers, just to be provocative, to get stuff in the news cycle, and these personalities that are able to tap into this and use it to get viewers, and that's so similar to Fox News, where you have these debates where you have someone say something completely outlandish, and you just immediately have that chyron at the bottom of the screen that's ready to put it, that insane saying, that insane quote, just so you can see it. That's something you see on C News. You'll have someone come on and say, I don't know, like inclusive writing is like contributing to the feminization of France, and it's like, boom. And you got that on the chyron, right. and you have it makes me honest. It makes me want to use the most inclusive writing possible right now when I see this data.
I just want to force femme France. I mean,
we're just slipping France's.
So you have this media sort of ecosystem that's closely tied to the far right politicians and their supporters, that realizing there's a big audience for this. A media that's realizing you can tap into this for viewers and clicks. And then you also have, I don't want to exaggerate it, but it's fair to say you have a government too that has decided for political reasons that it makes sense to legitimize not everything, but a certain number of the things the far right is saying. That's what Macron has done. Yes. Introducing French political observers to the concept of triangulation in the U.S., where you're trying to do everything at once. You can keep the sort of centrist happy. Maybe say you support abortion rights, extending, enhancing abortion rights, what the government's doing right now. But at the same time, having your cabinet members go out on television and say that there's an Islamo-Leftist contagion in the university system that needs to be fought. Trying to pass laws to make it illegal to film police officers during protests. Something that fortunately was rejected by the Constitutional Council, at least that specific measure of the security bill. The separatist bill as well. So the government has decided it's in their interest to sort of play up the far right because, or to at least to talk about certain issues that used to be reserved to the far right, because it helps them politically. It makes puts the left in a defensive position. And it sort of, at least in their view, sort of bolsters this main divide that they're trying to build up in France between, it's either you're on our side, the Macronists, that we're progressive, we like Europe, we believe in internationalism in theory, cosmopolitanism, and then on the other side of that divide is and their Macronist reading, the nationalists who are just inward looking and don't have much of aren't optimistic about the future of the country. And so Macron's policy has been driving towards enhancing this divide the same way that the far right likes having this divide. So I don't know, I'm saying a lot of things, but I think those are all different elements to keep in mind there. Go ahead.
It does remind me of one clip from a French debate that went viral. I think it was from the regional elections, but someone from, I believe it was Republic en Marche, accusing Le Pen on stage of being too soft on Muslims.
Yeah.
It was the interior minister we talked about before, right?
Yeah, and that was, I guess it was slightly taken out of context, but yeah, ultimately he did say that. He said that. He then claimed that, his supporters claimed it was, he was sort of mocking her because he's not saying that he believed that, he's mocking her. Still, he said it, and Darmanin.
I think the clip got the clip got shared mostly because of her face. I think her reaction to it was just priceless.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just want to focus on the Bolloré, if I'm saying his name right, the billionaire who owns C News, for a second, because again, as I understand it, he kind of there was a strike at iTele, the channel, and then he kind of used this and other machinations to like gut and turn the company into, I don't know, pursue these. I guess there were strong headwinds for this kind of channel, and as I understand it, the channel that had been losing a lot of money is, I don't know, going in the other direction. He's bought up other media properties. I think Europe One is the name of the radio, and so. There's a reason he gets called like a Rupert Murdoch figure, and Eric Zemmour is like the number one talent on the channel, right?
Although now he's no longer on the channel because he's running for president.
But even before, as I understand it, before he was officially running, there was a court order to take him off because he was effectively. Maybe you know the legal language, but he was violating the equal campaign time just by talking about the election, even though he wasn't running it.
Yeah, that was a decision from the French regulator that regulates TV.
And I think that Zemmour and his supporters kind of used that along with the convictions for, I don't know, Holocaust denial or whatever it might be. I'm not sure if Zemmour
there's at least 2 convictions for racial hate speech, and then there's a third for anti-Muslim hate speech. So there's at least 3.
Anyway, as I understand it, that's all fodder for creating this image of fighting the establishment.
Yes, yeah. I dealt with some Zemmour supporting reply guys on Twitter.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that because I think I'm not sure whether this fits under the distinctly French content or the American form, but the Zemmour figure. I was thinking about this when we were talking about Le Pen, because if I'm not mistaken, like Le Pen did want to maybe like professionalize the party a bit. I think that was part of her mission, and then Zemmour is coming in with a completely decentralized structure with basically French Pepes online, all of that kind of decentralized network that will hopefully
National
that
Rally
has been trying to propel him. I think it was like Friends of Zemmour that are saying like we're trying to get him to run for president.
National Rally was like
a long time now,
an actual structure, and like whenever you looked at like members of the Le Pen family and like where they met their spouse, it was always at like party functions, basically like dinners or get-togethers or youth party meetings, that kind of thing, which was creepy. Seemed very explicitly like grooming. But you're right. Like Zemmour is Zemmour. I don't even think he has a party name. Does he need one?
Oh, he does.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he has his party name has just been unveiled, which is Reconquête.
You'll like it, Kieran.
Reconquête, which is a reference to like I guess in Spanish, right? The Reconquista, the reconquest.
Oh no,
that's literally his party name, Kieran.
No,
Reconquest.
No.
Yeah, I had that filed under the distinctly French section of my notes on Zemmour.
God damn it!
Yeah, I mean it's interesting when you think about like I'm sorry to do the comparison because everyone's doing it these days, but like with Trump, when you think about the form that the sort of like proto-fascist leader is going to take in the U.S. It makes sense for it to be this, this guy pretending to be a successful businessman, which is like the distillation of just perfect, American essence. In France, we have a guy pretending to be like a brave, courageous, intellectual philosopher who says what nobody else is thinking.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah. I love, just like, just old pasty men.
But that begs the question: what the German version is? Just like I used to run an Aldi Sud, and
no, I mean we can flesh this out because I don't know. I was thinking, Cole, when you were talking earlier about this intellectual debate, I was thinking, Eric Zemmour is the Parisian intellectual. I mean that as an insult to the public intellectual, not a compliment to Zemmour. Yeah. And it does make sense that like it is the most like degraded, embarrassing version of this like national, this like national pride. It's like, it will have to be even more embarrassing than Bernard-Henri Lévy. Like we're not there yet. Zemmour might not be enough too. It might be, it might go further, but it tracks completely, at least, that Trump would be businessman, Zemmour Paris intellectual or whatever.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, that and the fact that he is, it's people. I've read quotes being like, yeah, Le Pen is not enough. Like Le Pen doesn't capture that spirit in the way Zemmour does.
Well,
that goes on TV.
There's this famous quote. It's more like a saying, I guess, that gets thrown around a lot in French politics, which is people used to say this about the right wing when they would try to imitate the National Front at that time. So I think it was what Jean-Marie Le Pen said to Sarkozy during the 2007 debate, because Sarkozy's strategy was to tack right and to tap into the far right base. Jean-Marie Le Pen at that point in the debate, I think in 2007, said, well, voters always preferred the original to the copy. And so that's a line that people say, a lot, talking about attempts to imitate the National Front, meaning it's always going to backfire because you can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, the National Front, is going to win the battle of ideas. In some ways, Zemmour is applying that logic, against the National Front. Which is to say, voters prefer the original spirit of the national rally, which is to say Zemmour. Zemmour is the one who's the real national rally. He's the one, who has that spirit. Whereas now, Marine Le Pen is sort of like this is like a watered down version of it. You don't get that same fiery, feeling you get by going to the church service and having the preacher get up and, do all the hits for you.
I was reading I think it was in Le Monde, the Jean-Marie Le Pen, the Marine Le Pen's father, co-founder of the party, who was kicked out of the party a couple years ago as part of this general, I forget the word you used, but the softening.
The de-demonization.
Jean-Marie Le Pen said he would vote for Zemmour over his daughter.
That's right. My daughter sucks.
The exact quote, okay, this is translated, but he gave this quote talking about Zemmour. The only difference between Eric and me is that he is Jewish. So it's difficult to call him a Nazi or a fascist. That gives him greater freedom.
God damn it. Yeah, of course Jean-Marie's going to talk about people's religion and ethnicity like he's, I don't know, playing like an RPG Elder Scrolls kind of game. He's immune to calls being called a Nazi.
As I understand
that was my weakness.
Most of his supporters say the same thing. They're like, it's great. We got a not a woman, Parisian intellectual who's Jewish, that seems to be a big selling point for a lot of the, which also reminds me a lot of the alt-right in the US, which is checkmate, he came back. What if a black woman said this instead?
That's always been, and I've seen that exact same defense of Zemmour before, how can he be anti-Semitic? He's Jewish and things like that, even though he's doing stuff that could count as anti-Semitism just by
there's also to harp on the comparison with the US, but you think about the alt-right, and I don't know if I think about the Trump campaign in 2016, the famous line about Bannon, which I'm seeing circulate here in France because people are tapping into it, but the Bannon strategy of just flood the zone with shit, basically that's the far right in France. It's Zemmour doesn't have to talk about COVID, he doesn't have to talk about his plans for the economy, he doesn't have to talk about the minimum wage or workers, whatever. All he has to do is talk about identity, about environmentalists that want to attack hunters' rights, the people that want to take away your foie gras. He can talk about the woke culture wars. It's just this constant barrage of bullshit, and then here we are talking about it. We're talking about it for the right reasons, but this is what the French media spends their days, talking about, and we're in this sort of infernal cycle, and that's sort of how political discourse is in France today.
To linger on it for just a little bit longer, because some of our listeners probably saw he had his first official rally a few days ago, which is where a bunch of anti-racist protesters were, a fight broke out, basically. I don't know. I have a few hits from that.
Some quotes,
some questions that were raised for me. If anyone's curious, I'll put it. There was something in Jacobin a couple of days ago, about it. One is this: they have a white baseball cap that's their version of MAGA. I can't speak French, but do you know what I'm referring to?
Yeah, I saw. It's what does it say? Ben voyant or something like that.
Ben voyant.
I mean, I don't think it's.
That means that's again. So that's We'll see. What does that mean? Like, how is that?
Let's see about that. Like, let's see.
That seems very, again, like, well, okay, I'll go on to the next one.
I'm sorry, it makes me think about that. What's that line from, the actor from, never mind, go ahead.
No. This should clarify, because that seems to be, again, we're tapping into what does French, the new French fascism look like. Zamore lamented that the subjunctive is no longer taught at primary schools.
Yes.
At around 6 p.m. So this is when Zamore actually enters after like a long day of, I don't know, the speakers before him. First of all, there's this Generation Z that are like basically these like Zoomer and millennial foot soldiers for Zamore. Basically the alt-right. At around 6, this is directly from the Jackman article. At around 6 p.m., Zamore entered the convention center, preceded by a montage of images and scenes from the old France that his campaign wants to resuscitate. Portraits of Brigitte Bardot, Voltaire, and clips of Gaullist supporters taking to the streets in 1968, which seems to me to be the trifecta of all this bullshit, which is sexy lady who agrees with us, old French guy, literally like supporters taking to the streets to like beat back the striking workers on the left,
bitching about grammar.
And you had that too,
No, that's a good story that captures. I think you're referring to Harrison Stetler's piece, which is good. Yeah. A good way of capturing the Zamore phenomenon.
Anything else on Zamore we want to hit? Do you want to complain about the online bullies, Kieran? I know you were getting bullied. It was referred to by the Zamore insiders themselves.
They were bullying me because I was making fun of Ciotti, the person in the Les Républicains, who was basically trying to be another Zemmour by the looks of things. They were very supportive. What was strange is that like a French friend of mine was looking at their profiles and like, these are Zemmour guys. I don't really understand why they're coming to bat for Ciotti. I guess they just. Which seems very strange. It's a very strange way of handling like a cult of personality like that. I was like, we'll accept a substitute. As a very
Ciotti said that he would support Zemmour against Macron in the second round election, and Ciotti was sort of the hard right turn within the Les Républicains, the quote unquote conventional, but actually just this pure right wing party, which I think ultimately has the best chance against Macron. But
well, before we get to that, I want to torture Kieran for 1 second longer.
Okay, cool,
this is a quote from a Politico piece on Zamore, paraphrasing again interviews with Zamore's supporters.
Sure.
Zamore's online supporters, some from the gaming community, can be a significant force, said the official working in his movement.
Using gaming words, all right.
You don't need many, maybe 150, 200, he said. If they all push the same topic online, it starts trending. So this seems to be the playbook. Which is harass you specifically.
Yeah, they're just this is the playbook of like
jokes
SoundCloud.
on them.
How do you say meme magic in French? That's the question.
To meme. But like this is fucking SoundCloud rapper bullshit. I'm just buying a bunch of supporters online and claiming you're super popular and get them to push the links to your track and whatnot.
Okay,
what's the French gaming scene like?
That's a good question.
Racist, like all of them.
I think so now.
Actually, in 2017, there's a popular video game forum that was a big base for Mélenchon support. Actually,
okay.
So gamers are fighting in the trenches out there.
Yeah, it's really a different world over there in France.
Keep it up. Okay, we need a little bit of context.
Como se dice Gamergate? Französisch.
I love that you do like 3 languages there. Good job.
This is a big. I think it definitely is a compelling narrative, right? That this like kind of new bankrolled billionaire media star can like tap into whatever this like outside the party establishment and roll to victory. He's debuted now that he's officially a candidate. He's kind of in the mix behind Le Pen and possibly also the Republicans. What are people saying? Are people expecting him to take off? Is it like this? Oh, will he? Won't he? Is it a general pessimism? What's the situation right now?
Yeah, I mean, he took off in the early stages of his campaign, or I guess before he officially declared. It was way up in the polls, ahead of Le Pen for a brief moment. Now he's sort of fallen back a little bit, but still, as you mentioned, is sort of running, I would say at this point, because of the different polls, neck and neck with both Le Pen and the right-wing candidate, Valérie Pécresse. All three of them are running between, I don't know, like 13 to 17, 18%.
17 is the highest I've seen, yeah.
And Zemmour is a little bit below Le Pen, but they're all sort of in the same pack. So yeah, he has a shot, I guess, in theory. Although there's so much that can happen. We're still 4 months away from the election. A lot can happen. So it's hard. It's hard to say. Will at that are Le Pen and Zemmour really both going to be in the race in early April if they have a shot of qualifying for the second round together? I don't know. It's hard to say. But right now, clearly, he's one of the top candidates, the top four candidates. None of them are on the left. It's Macron, Pécresse, Zemmour, and Le Pen. And that's also, why their issues are dominating the political discourse.
You mentioned Pécresse. She was just nominated, I believe, a few days ago as of recording.
Yeah.
What's the story there? I know maybe compared to media attention, they're actually quite high in the polls, you could say.
Yeah.
They come from, maybe talk a little bit about like the Republicans as the quote unquote standard center right party and what role they play in all this brave new world of
yeah, I mean,
French
politics. Their party has sort of been facing existential threat. I think that's the way that a lot of the activists and leaders who've stayed have portrayed things. Because on the one hand, coming out of the 2017 election, first time that the right wing is not in the second round of a presidential election in the Fifth Republic. So this really, massive defeat for the right wing. And on the one hand, you had a lot of the party fleeing to Macron. The party correctly understood that you have activists that are also being attracted to the National Rally / National Front. And so the question is sort of, what is the point of having this, right-wing party? What do we stand for at a time in which we have essentially a center-right president who's enacting a lot of the pro-business, anti-worker reforms that we've been pushing for years, that now they're finally enacting. We're not even the ones doing it. While to our immediate right, we have a party that's tapping into the right-wing identity politics issues that we've defended. And so, sort of like what's the point of having this party? And you have a lot of questions about that. They did pretty well in the local elections and the regional elections that were very low turnout. But in the primary that they just held, you essentially had, keeping in mind that broadly, a lot of the centrists that used to be in the party have fled to Macron. That's important to stress. You look at his interior minister, comes from Les Républicains. The former prime minister, both prime ministers actually, so Edouard Philippe, the former prime minister, and the current prime minister, Castex, both from Les Républicains. So you have the people flocking to Macron. The party's been sort of drifting to the right, and you have this sort of clash in the primary between, you were mentioning Éric Ciotti from Nice, super conservative part of the party as well. Nice is a hotbed of sort of right-wing identitarian politics in France. So you had Ciotti who had a very good score and made it to the second round against Pécresse, who just inched into the second round. Pécresse, who's a much more quote unquote establishment politician, pretty uninspiring. Yeah, she's the head of the Île-de-France region, the Paris region, the president. She used to be in a cabinet under Nicolas Sarkozy. So she lives in Versailles, a very like establishment, bourgeois right-wing politician who understands that in order to compete in her party today, she has to speak a certain language and build bridges with people like Ciotti. And that's what she's attempting to do right now. And it's hard to say if this is just because of the primary dominating the news cycle, but since that primary victory for Pécresse, she shot up in the polls. And is, some, I think one poll recently that got a lot of attention showed her actually beating Macron in the second round. Why does Pécresse do so well? Let me actually step back. she's obviously has a serious enthusiasm gap in the first round. If you're on the right, she's not going to make you so excited to get out and vote. Doesn't have the energy, the anti-establishment like aura, as Le Pen and Zemmour do. But on the other hand, this is part of France's unconventional, perhaps deeply flawed electoral system. If you have put Pécresse in the second round, she does much better because she's able to rally together basically everyone on the right who's against Macron. So the Le Pen and the Zemmour people, at least in the scenario that was being polled, they would vote for Pécresse. And conversely, Macron's great, I don't want to say wild card because it's now fundamentally part of his strategy, but the Macron strategy has always been, you have to vote for me because you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. If it's me against the fascists, I know you're going to come out and vote for me because you don't want to have Le Pen or now Zemmour become president. So if you have imagine Pécresse versus Macron matchup in the second round, people, I'll just be frank, people in my friend circles, what's the difference, right? For a lot of people, that's the way people think. What's the difference between Pécresse and Macron, And the Macron team understands that very well, which is why they are petrified, I think, of a second round matchup against the moderate right, not because the moderate right has such a great enthusiasm, but because just in terms of pure, electoral coalition building, are able to rally people from the far right without polarizing everyone from the left, at least not as much.
Yeah, it makes sense because like Macron has just been heavily reliant on like the quote unquote like Republican front. We've seen. I remember there was some tampering of like I can't remember. There was this media law that was passed that was kind of on the idea of past election results would inform how much airtime you got. And that was passed under Macron. That seems very like, well, okay, now you're just giving more airtime to your party and the party you really want to be against in the second round, Front National or National Rally. The branding on that has not worked internationally. We like it's, So
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if you say Macron and Pécresse would be almost the same, if Pécresse were to win. Or a lot of people look at it that way. If Pécresse were to win, could we expect something different than the Macron second term we laid out earlier?
I think just to be clear, I was talking more about sort of the image and how they're perceived and getting people to vote for you. But it's hard to say because I think Pécresse already has some, she's digging in more into the right wing cultural agenda on a national level. I think there'd be differences. So she says she wants to put quotas for immigration into the Constitution, change the Constitution to allow the government to do that. I think you have much less of the, she's pro-European Union, but not quite the same level as Macron. You have less of, frankly, she hasn't been president and doesn't have the same, European or international ambitions that Macron has been able to construct over the last few years, and now has the privilege of being able to, to continue defending on with the French presidency of the European Union. So Pécresse is probably more of a wild card on that question of foreign policy, but because we just don't know that much about her. She's been a regional politician in the cabinet, working her way up in the Republicans. She's not giving speeches about foreign policy, but that'll be, certainly something to watch.
Anything else on?
No, I mean, I think I can get into it another time, but it kind of looked like some character called Bertrand got fucking screwed.
No questions about the left. I was expecting.
No. I was about to say before the left. I was looking at Kieran. I mean, Kieran's the one who added the. I just want to talk about the sexy candidates.
I mean, you want to talk about the sexy candidates. I want to talk about the two classically establishment parties. Mainly, I'm just pissed that like a whole bunch. I don't know if you noticed this, but a whole bunch of English publications are really pushing the idea that Hidalgo is the savior of French politics, and all of them very suspiciously omit her polling numbers, which are abysmal.
I mean, Hidalgo appeals to middle class, well-educated people living in cities. who are liberal on social cultural issues, but don't want too much radical change in terms of the economy. And that makes sense that the sort of intellectual class, across the Anglosphere would be attracted to someone like that. She's, an environmentalist politician as well in Paris. Makes perfect sense.
So I think that's a good opportunity to talk about the left, or what is an actual alternative to anything, everyone we just discussed. My impression was, okay, so most people, again, know Jean-Luc Mélenchon from the France Insoumise. Again, we can't get into, there's so much background that we'll have to skip, but just, is there a difference between 2017 and 2020 with like a French, like the French left? Because, for example, I saw the Communist Party of France is running a candidate this time where they didn't last time. They backed Mélenchon. Is Mélenchon in a weaker position than 2017, stronger, or unclear?
Or is there any change? What is the nature of the change, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask the Mélenchon people today, if you ask Mélenchon himself, they'll say, that you can't look at the polls right now because they're going to change. Mélenchon is also an excellent campaigner. And so if you look even at 2017, he had sort of this late push that put him within, really gave him a real shot of qualifying for the second round, finished just behind, not too far behind, I should say, Marine Le Pen. He had about 20% of the vote in the first round. Same thing in 2012 when he campaigned. He had this sort of late push and had a pretty solid score in 2012. And so, the Mélenchon people will say you can't look at the polling numbers right now. That being said, I think it's fair to say that Mélenchon's broader image, regardless of electoral polling, look at his broader image, it's suffered since 2017. It's declined for a variety of reasons. One famous episode that people talk about a lot, which really impacted him negatively, was this episode of the police raids on the France Insoumise office in the context of an investigation into campaign financing, in which, and perhaps you guys are familiar with this, there's this infamous video where they're conducting the police raid and Mélenchon gets in front of one of the court officers. And he's screaming at him in his face, and he says, I am the Republic. Which I
thought that's what French voters liked. I thought they wanted to be like,
said that all the time.
I'm God Emperor.
To be fair, Mélenchon was making a reference to his status as a parliamentarian, meaning he represented the Republic, and so he should be treated with respect. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it was a crazy thing to say, and he was so angry, and everyone only saw.
I really like the idea that French people just say that all the time. Like you order a sandwich and they screw up your order. And it's like, oh fucking bitch, I'm the Republic.
What is the what is the like? I guess there's like different lefts, but let's say the like Mélenchon electoral left. What role did they play in this like circus that's going around? One thing I saw is that like often Le Pen is called like basically a communist by like Zemmour or others. They're like, oh, that latest position from National Rally that's basically makes her like the Communist Party and stuff. So like, is Mélenchon being referenced? Is he not engaging at all? Maybe a good way to talk about it is I saw that he debated Zemmour. Like Mélenchon, challenged him. So did they actually debate? And if so, like what happened? Because I didn't see any of the actual.
They did have a debate.
Results.
And Mélenchon was criticized by a lot of other people on the left in France for deciding to debate Zemmour. The idea being that he would be further, building Zemmour's credibility. Of course, now we saw just a few days ago the economy minister. The finance minister debated Zemmour on television, so I'm not sure if they make the argument today. But regardless, that argument was made at the time. I think it was in September, October. Maybe I don't want to give you false information. In any case, several weeks ago, they had this debate. And Mélenchon, to his credit, I think has been one of the few politicians on the left to really confront the far right. And to say, it sounds really silly to have to point this out, but Mélenchon is someone who will explicitly say that there's a attacks against Muslims going on today in France. And he says the word Muslims because it's true, Muslims are being targeted in France. And it sounds so simple to have to point out, but Mélenchon he's someone who actually uses that word, won't make sort of vague references like Hidalgo or even Roussel for his part, to the idea that, there is racism and discrimination. But, Mélenchon will say, stop demonizing Muslims. And I think that matters. So Mélenchon, to his credit, has been pretty forceful in that respect, which is sort of ironic, I guess, because his image before, certainly outside of France, has been that he's, attached to this sort of like French republicanism, and it hasn't been so great on issues of racism. But Mélenchon has been, very critical of police violence, very critical of the racist discourse that we see every day in France. Very critical of the Islamophobia, although he doesn't use that word, but that's a whole other conversation. He does talk about attacks against Muslims. So Mélenchon has been strong on that point. The problem is he has a very negative image because he's seen as again, I'm not saying I agree with that, but he's seen by a lot of people as sort of extremely polarizing, sort of just this kind of grumpy, like irritable guy who's going to be upset about anything that whatever idea that's being proposed by the government. He continues to sort of have these moments where he rubs people the wrong way. I'll give you just an example. And this is why Mélenchon is a complicated person for people on the left. You see him on the one hand, it's like, great, Mélenchon is taking on Zemmour by saying, stop, you're upset. Why are you so obsessed with demonizing Muslims? That's great. Then Mélenchon will, issue a stinging rebuke of, the need to have, vaccine mandates or support the movement for against the health pass, and really dig into that. And again, that's a discussion we can have. Things are different certainly in Europe than in the U.S. But Mélenchon has they've dug into this anti-vaccine pass movement, which like literally is doomed to fail. It was going to fail, the movement, and so you can sort of ask the question: well, what if you want to be a politician who's going to build a coalition around you to win? Why dig into this anti-health pass movement that's going nowhere? I know people will be upset that I'm saying this right now, but I think it's a fair point to make.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight, it really. I mean, I don't know what in France it is the deal of, but it's like because Germany's finally doing it with the vaccine mandate that was passed actually today. Of recording this on the 10th, that the Bundestag has agreed to a mandatory vaccine thing for like healthcare workers in Germany, which is how it started. I believe in France, Greece had the same thing, Italy had the same thing.
Austria's doing that as well.
Yeah. And this is surprisingly not being met with much, even now, a country that then has had a very stupid vaccine rollout. Not so much now because of Germany's bad vaccine rollout, but because of the massive anti-vaxxer movement in Germany, and there is a class dynamic to it as well. But I don't see this. It's like a non-issue at this point. Like it really is. Like these vaccine mandates will get passed in different forms. And I think within like a 3-month period, people will be like, oh yeah, they kind of had to do that because,
I think the interesting idea, I think you put it very well, Cole, of just like calling them doomed, because it's a combination of these two things you're talking about, because it's not like trying to rally those people around you only works for a certain extent, because unless you're in government tomorrow, you can't stop the vaccine rollout from happening. And by the time they already have the vaccines, they're not really going to like... You can't come into government and say, well, we're going to take the vaccine out of you.
The health pass, yeah.
Yeah, or any like, I mean, sure, the health pass stuff, you could do that, but like, hopefully in 4 months' time in France.
Yeah. I'm going to suck my arm like I just got bit by a rattlesnake. That totally works, right?
Well, it's interesting because I guess I would like to ask, so if Mélenchon represents, again, what I term this electoral left, what about the, like, maybe the street left, for lack of a better word? Because we did have the yellow vest, something we've barely talked about on this show. And that's something that I think has signified changes, resurgence, something of the left in France. There are the widespread strikes that you referred to. But is it fair? Like, how do those things relate? How does Mélenchon relate to those movements? And how does Mélenchon relate to the anti-health pass movement? And what are the differences, let's say, between the Yellow Vests, which I think also, was first labeled and maybe was a right-wing movement. It certainly was hailed as such by some right-wing commentators around the world.
Yeah.
But you understand where I'm going.
Yeah.
I would disagree with that, calling it a right wing movement, but it certainly wasn't a left wing movement. It was sort of like a, uprising against the rising cost of living, lack of public services, neglect from the government, very loosely organized, and so you had a lot of different issues that were represented. You had some far right elements, it should be said. You had also a lot of far left elements. There have been very significant protest movements in France in the last few years. The Yellow Vests, obviously. There was a huge wave of anti-racist protests last summer, led by Assa Traoré. In part tapping into the Black Lives Matter movement in the U.S. and the protests over George Floyd, but also tapping into this case in France about Adama Traoré, who died in police custody, Assa Traoré's brother, in his early 20s, that sort of galvanized mostly young French people, Black French people, Arab French people, white French people. I feel sorry when I speak in English about using France's like weird racial euphemisms and for not talking about race, it comes across as awkwardly. Anyways, so you had this big diverse protest movement that was that took place last summer. That was full of young people that were not necessarily politicized, and I was there talking to people, and it was really interesting to see that happen. And you also have a strong environmentalist protest movement, with mostly high school students and college students as well. All these movements. To get back to your original question, Mélenchon has tapped into them to a significant degree. Mélenchon has embraced the sort of anti-racist cause as central to his political identity. He's been really criticized for doing that, and I think actually to the contrary, it was the right move, and he should be, frankly, applauded for it, because no one else has the courage to do something that should be so obvious. Instead you have the socialists, and the communists who say that they're against too much identity politics, and so they see this as maybe too radical. Anyways, so you have some proximity with the movements there with Mélenchon. You also have the farther left parties. The NPA, the new anti-capitalist party, that has close links to those movements as well. And the Green Party obviously has links to the environmental movement. We'll see what happens with the election. I think it's fair to say that not all these parties that you're seeing right now in the polls are going to be there come April 2022. Some of them are going to drop out. There's even efforts right now to sort of spark left unity. That don't seem to be going anywhere, but.
No, I really
really?
No, because it's very particular in France, or at least how I've seen this kind of left unity discussion brought up, which is just like left unity almost seems to be this thing that's like specifically anti-Mélenchon as well, because like a lot, like for example, like France 24 will include left unity to mean like Hidalgo's party, the Greens party, Yannick or something.
Yannick Jadot. Jadot.
Yannick Jadot. As like, and then La France Insoumise as these like three parties that maybe need to unify in some capacity to have a real chance, but then also just being like, but Mélenchon can't be the leader. It's like, well, why not? He's the one like leading in the polls. He should be if you were to unite. Like it seems very kind of like anti-left to a certain extent with that conversation of left unity, or at least how I've seen it.
Yeah, no, I mean. The thing is, everyone would say they're in favor of left unity. Hidalgo said she supported it as long as they got behind her. Jadot said he supported it as long as they get behind him. Mélenchon says it as long as they get behind him. So I think, to answer your question, I don't see Mélenchon's position as being fundamentally worse than what the others have been saying as well. Fabien Roussel, the head of the Communist Party, says Hidalgo should get behind him. So it's not as if Mélenchon is the only problem here. He certainly isn't. There's a shared sense that left unity can happen, but it needs to take place behind, the candidate that you want.
I guess my argument to that would be like he's the only one where I think the credibility to say that, because he's like, you mentioned he's not on the top 3 candidates or 4 candidates if we include Macron, because what we've been talking about, but he's, like I said, like Hidalgo's like maybe 5% I see is the highest, and he's like coming at 9, 10, or 11.
The general sorry, why don't you go ahead? I want to.
No, I was just building off of Kieran's question, because I think that's what I think is so fascinating about, or why also people outside France care about Mélenchon, because this is my last Anglo-American comparison of the night. But part of the reason people talked about Bernie or Corbyn was it's like, no, this is different. They're special because they have a broader base. It's not a left-wing protest candidate running and getting 2%. There's something going on here. And so there's something that could be a common denominator or agreement for a movement. And maybe I have a 2-part question. Did Mélenchon have that in 2017? Does he still have it? I conditioned my question. Did he have it in 2017? Does he have it in 2020? Because maybe it's just not the same, agreement of like, no. Because what you're saying is predicated on not just him being a little, 3 points higher than the Greens candidate, but being a center of gravity that could unite a broad swath of the left, from the street movements to other left parties.
Yeah, I mean, just before I respond to that, I mean, if you look at the polling now, it's not like Mélenchon's lead is that significant.
Exactly.
At the Greens, Jadot is like around 7-8%. Mélenchon is like 10, 11. It depends on what polls you look at, but it's not as if there's a huge lead either for Mélenchon versus Jadot. But about Mélenchon in 2017, he was able to build a really successful campaign that tapped into, I think fundamentally the most important thing about the Mélenchon campaign is that you have this general tendency, at least in 2017, the campaign, you have this general tendency across European and North American politics in which the historic parties of the left are losing their ties to the working class and the working class voters that used to vote for these parties. It's something you can observe with the Democratic Party in the U.S. You see it with the Labour Party in the UK. I know Germany less well, but I think you probably see it with the SPD as well. Maybe not as much. In any case, there's
opposite.
Yeah. So there's and this is research that I think it's in the latest Piketty book. He goes into this as well, and you have a sort of subset of people studying this, in which you have this documented phenomenon. I think one of the real qualities of Mélenchon in 2017 was his ability to not reverse that trend, but to at least conserve some ties between working class voters and a radical left candidacy. I say radical left, but ultimately, just like a basic sort of social democratic platform, because the historic forces have abandoned that cause. So you have it's taken up by parties that used to be considered to be further left. So Mélenchon's campaign, I think, was so successful in 2017 because it was able to do that. It was able to both get, it was seen by a lot of, left-wing middle-class voters in cities with nowhere to go as the right option. And it was also seen by people who, working-class people who might not have even turned out at the polls as the right candidate, the candidate who was going to talk about, who wanted to raise the minimum wage, who wanted to crack down on tax evasion, make the rich pay more, have the state have a more significant role in the economy, maybe reform the EU in a more progressive sense. All that worked in 2017, I'm not saying I don't know if it's going to work again in 2022. A lot can happen, but it is worth pointing out a significant difference but from 2017 to 2022 is that his polling numbers, his unfavorability ratings are really high because of because of this episode of the police raids, because of the party's image under Macron. I don't know how much of that can be recovered because he doesn't have a great image, including among a lot of left-wing voters that backed him in 2017. So I'm not saying, it's insurmountable, but it certainly seems like an uphill battle. And I think, right? Or go ahead.
No, I'm not sure if it's from your article or not, but this is from a late September study, which has his negative, I guess, was it like a negative approval rating, I guess is the question asked. He was at 54% have a negative view. That's sandwiched between Le Pen at 52 and Zemmour at 59.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, and we can debate whether people should have that opinion or not, but it's a real thing.
No one's allowed to have an opinion on this show.
And the other,
that's,
the Mélenchon strategy, if you talk to their people, is this strategy. And it's difficult for me because I think, on the one hand, my political affinities make me sympathetic to this sort of argument. But on the other hand, it's something that hasn't really worked yet. But it's this idea of, we saw Bernie apply this strategy really in both campaigns. We saw Corbyn apply this strategy as well. This idea of saying, to win, we're not going to focus on, I think fundamentally it probably is the right position in terms of principles, but fundamentally we're not going to go after the, liberal leaning professionals who turn out a lot at the polls. We're not going to shift our campaign to talk to them just because they vote more. We have to run a campaign that's targeted at people that don't turn out at the polls, that are working class, because that's the coalition that we need in order to govern and to win. That's the strategy that the Bernie people applied. It's what Corbyn applied. It's what Mélenchon tried to do in 2017. It worked a little bit, but the question is, do you have enough people that can turn out and support you? Are you able to connect with enough people, given the broader political landscape, given the fact that you have a weakened labor movement, given the fact that the left organizations are much weaker than they used to be? Are you able to have that sort of message resonate in a way that, maybe it would have a decade ago, 20, 30 years ago? I'm not so sure about that. So that's the real gamble for Mélenchon, this, turning out the people that don't turn out to vote. It's a noble cause. It just hasn't worked yet.
The regional elections earlier this year had record low turnout.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah. It was ridiculously low, but it's like it's worth pointing out that Bernie's like going to the disenfranchised, don't turn out voters, I think works in the United States, or makes a lot of sense in the United States, where your turnout rates are like Eastern European levels.
He was president.
Well, no, but like it makes sense. Like
it did work until he got until the DNC fucking 360 no scoped him.
But you can look at the math and you can look at the historical turnout rate in the United States and say this math checks out. There's like about almost 50% of this country that doesn't vote, but like that doesn't necessarily work out in Europe, where it's like a low turnout rate in some European countries is like, I don't know, 79%. That's not like this unvoting number isn't huge a mass.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's the same for France.
No, France, compared to the US has high turnout. So yeah, we're talking about a smaller pool of voters for sure.
That's it's interesting, and I'm curious to see how his campaign goes, because I think I read somewhere that he's going to be doing door-to-door voting, which is not like door-to-door, campaigning, which is not normal for France.
Yeah, they've been doing that. Yeah, they have a really strong organization. They have this whole app system set up where you can just engage in door knocking, which is, again, as you pointed out, not a typical thing in France. So they have a big, strong campaign organization. The question is, can you kind of fight through this really toxic, shitstorm that we're in today in France and reach people?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to, in the next 4 months, my promise to the listeners is I want to try to understand France as much as I possibly can, a country where you can't outright say that most candidates are being Islamophobic, but Islamo-Leftist is an acceptable term that can be printed. It makes so much sense to me, this whole country. I think that we've got...
That's all I got.
Yeah.
I have one question for you, Cole. I don't know if you want to answer it, but do you have a prediction? Who's going to be the two runoff candidates? Because I mentioned that Macron as a shoo-in earlier, and you seem to... I was curious if you have any other ideas about what might happen.
No, I was just saying that I don't think that it's, that he's a shoo-in, that we don't... It's not... I think he's the likely favorite, but I don't know if... we don't know for sure that he's going to be in the second round. It's not obvious. I guess I can give a prediction, but on the condition that we only play this only comes out again after my prediction comes true. I don't want this circulating if it turns out to be false.
Sure.
It only can be shared if it's correct.
We'll lock away in the vault.
No, I'm kidding. You can play it. I don't care. But I will only point it if it's correct. No, I mean, I think ultimately, probably Pécresse and Macron.
Okay.
Mm.
So exciting. I know. Yeah.
It's an interesting one because there's this chance as they get along that Zemmour and Le Pen are going to start cannibalizing the vote for each other. And then at the same time, they're also kind of doomed candidacies because they do none of them perform well in the second round. I think a lot of the predictions or the matchups have Zemmour performing worse against Macron than Le Pen does. And Le Pen isn't doing too hot either. So it's there's also been a huge spike in Republican membership as well.
Well, that was in order to vote in the party Congress. But yeah, I think she becomes the vote utile, the useful vote for the right. If you want to beat Macron, you vote for Pécresse. But again, a lot can happen. So I'm sure this prediction will probably be false. A lot can happen.
Yeah, French elections are so long. Oh my God.
Well, compared to Germany, I guess. Not compared to
Germany's are 6 weeks. Yeah.
No, yeah. Well, this is the thing that's becoming more American in France as well. I remember 2017 was the first year in which there was a televised Les Républicains debate for their primary. And I remember the reaction on the ground from French people was this is very American. It seems, yeah.
Germany's very nice, and you have a federal law that says when the election campaign can start, which is 6 weeks out of the election.
We have in Ireland
one of maybe the only German laws I kind of agree with.
In Ireland, you get fined if the posters are still up. After
same thing here.
Yeah. I love that rule. Right. Thank you. With that, we've covered a lot. We've gone a little bit over time. Cole, thank you so much. Where can the people find you if you want to be found?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Twitter.com. I have a Twitter.com.
I've heard of it.
I have a Twitter page. I have a website. You can go colestangler.com.
Cool. We'll have links to all of that in the description.
Great.
Let's see. Anything we have to say? We might still have a show on the 9th of January.
I think we will.
Pending.
I legitimately think that we will.
Yeah, okay.
I'm confident of the way that the
government is going to ignore the problems.
No, not that. I'm talking about in the sense of that, for the listeners who do want to, potentially come and see us live, I have a little bit of confidence of going to the bars recently again.
Yeah.
And
Were you the bar expert?
No, but
I'm a little drunk
This
right
is
now.
No.
Like
Hey,
an
stop.
alcoholic version of the lawn sign argument.
Of how they've been doing the vaccine passport thing, and how they've been you have to check in this and that. I genuinely think that they're finally taking it serious now. I think that we can probably have our event. They're making it very specific that they do not want to do a lockdown. They do not want to have events canceled because of this, and they really want to make it in the sense of get vaxxed so that you can have a fun time. So also the corner Späti message of if you're not vaccinated in the country of Germany or anywhere, should probably do that, because then you can kind of go back to living your life kind of normal-ish.
And most importantly, you can come to our live show January 9th at Donau 115, Donau Strasse 115.
If you happen to be anti-vax for whatever reason and are listening to this, get the vaccine and we will sell you pills that counteract it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nick will suck it out of you like that rattlesnake movie we're talking about.
Promise.
Something that you have to learn in Arizona. Basic survival of
when the vaccines bite. Right. With that, we will catch you on Friday. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.